She held his hand, feeling the roughness of his calloused palms from work, and moved closer, her heart beating erratically. The silence between them was laden with an unspoken promise, a feeling they both knew was as dangerous as it was inevitable. Their proximity increased, and the world around them seemed to disappear. The nocturnal sounds of the garden, the leaves whispering in the wind, and the intoxicating scent of flowers created a dreamlike setting. Elizabeth could feel the warmth of his body close to hers, their breaths mingling in the night. Welcome! If you're new here and enjoying this story, subscribe to the channel now and don't miss the upcoming episodes. The gardener leaned in slowly, his lips almost touching hers. Elizabeth closed her eyes, waiting for the moment she knew would change everything between them. But before their lips could meet, a distant sound interrupted the moment. The echo of a door slamming shut in the mansion brought them back to reality. They both pulled away abruptly, the magic of the moment broken by the sudden intrusion. They looked towards the mansion, where lights still shone in the upstairs windows. Elizabeth felt her heart tighten, aware of the implications of what had almost happened. "Perhaps we should go back," he said, his voice heavy with a regret she also felt. Elizabeth nodded in agreement, and they walked back in silence, the tension still present between them. When they parted to return to their respective quarters, she cast a final look at him, hoping to find some sign of what he was thinking. That night, as Elizabeth lay in her bed, her thoughts were confused by the memory of the interrupted moment in the garden. She wondered what might have happened if they hadn't been interrupted, and if there would be another opportunity to explore what they felt for each other. She knew that what they shared was dangerous and that the mansion's secrets still hung over them like a dark cloud. However, as the stars shone in the sky above, Elizabeth promised herself she would do anything to discover the truth and follow her heart, even if it meant confronting the silence in Sinclair's mansion. And so, she fell asleep with a mix of hope and apprehension, not knowing that the coming days would bring revelations that would change everything. Days later, Elizabeth began to notice details that didn't align with the gardener's simplicity. At first, they were just small things that could easily be dismissed as coincidences. However, the more time she spent in his company, the more these peculiarities stood out, painting a complex picture that went beyond his humble appearance. One afternoon, while helping to gather forgotten tools in the garden, Elizabeth found a book of poetry left on a stone bench. The pages were marked with notes in the margins, revealing a keen mind and a deep appreciation for literature. She carefully flipped through the pages, absorbing the elegant verses and handwritten reflections. Something about that book seemed disproportionate to the image of the humble gardener, sparking her curiosity. In another moment, during a casual conversation about the flowers he tended with such care, Elizabeth noticed an expression in his eyes that spoke of a cultured soul and an untold story. He mentioned, in passing, a rare flower from South America, describing it with a precision and enthusiasm that suggested knowledge acquired from books, not just everyday practice. The way he spoke, with a fluency that contrasted with his usual modesty, was intriguing. Elizabeth also observed that, in the quieter hours, the gardener seemed lost in thought, his gaze fixed on the horizon as if reminiscing about a distant past. She began to wonder about the origins of this mysterious man who worked tirelessly in the mansion's garden. What had brought him here? What was his true story? The attraction Elizabeth felt for the gardener went beyond his appearance and skills. There was something about him that spoke directly to her heart, a mystery she longed to unravel. The nights they spent under the starry sky became moments of deep connection, where words were less important than the exchanged glances and shared smiles. Parallel to this, Elizabeth couldn't ignore the presence of Lord Sinclair, even though he remained a distant figure. The mansion, with its shadows and secrets, seemed to hold answers to the questions forming in her mind. Who was Lord Sinclair really? And how was he connected to the gardener who stirred so many conflicting emotions within her? Life in Sinclair's mansion was a constant dance between routine and mystery. Elizabeth immersed herself in daily activities, caring for the children and managing household tasks, but her mind often wandered to the enigmas surrounding the place. Every corridor, every room seemed to whisper old stories, and she found herself imagining the events those walls had witnessed over the years. One night, while walking through the mansion's silent corridors, Elizabeth found an old photograph in one of the locked rooms. It was a faded image of a young man with a noble air and a determined expression. Something about that face seemed familiar, and she couldn't help but feel a shiver of recognition. Could it be that this was Lord Sinclair in his youth? Or perhaps someone related to him? The questions piled up, and the answers seemed more elusive each day. Each encounter with the gardener became a piece of a larger puzzle. Elizabeth could no longer ignore the signs pointing to a complex story and a life full of secrets. She found herself increasingly attracted not only to the man he appeared to be, but also to the mysteries hidden in that imposing mansion. One day, while walking together in the garden, Elizabeth finally gave in to the curiosity consuming her. "Have you traveled much?" she asked, trying to keep her voice casual. "You know so much about plants from distant places." The gardener stopped, his eyes fixed on hers, before answering with an enigmatic smile. "I have seen many things, Elizabeth. Some good, some not so good. Each left its mark." The response, vague and full of implications, only increased Elizabeth's fascination. She knew there was much more to discover, both about the gardener and about the mansion and its mysterious lord. The attraction she felt was now inseparable from the need to uncover the secrets surrounding her. The nights she spent thinking about the gardener and the mansion's mysteries became more intense. She wondered what the truth was behind the smiles and unspoken words, what the real story was of this man who seemed to know so much about the world yet chose to live in the simplicity of Sinclair's garden. One afternoon, as the sun shone brightly over the garden, Elizabeth and the gardener were again side by side, working among the flowers. There was a tense calm in the air, a feeling that something was about to happen. Elizabeth noticed that the gardener was more introspective than usual, his eyes fixed on the plants, but his mind clearly elsewhere. While cutting some flowers, Elizabeth accidentally dropped a sharp pair of scissors, which almost hit the gardener's foot. He reacted quickly, catching the tool in midair before it could cause any harm. "Careful, Elizabeth," he exclaimed, concern evident in his voice. "Sorry," she murmured, feeling her face flush with embarrassment. "I didn't mean to." He interrupted her, holding her hand firmly. "It's okay. Just be more careful." His touch sent a wave of warmth through Elizabeth's body, and she felt their eyes meet in a moment filled with unspoken emotions. But before they could pull away, one of the servants appeared, breaking the tension. "Lord Sinclair has requested someone to accompany him on a horseback ride this afternoon," he announced. "Elizabeth, he asked for you." Surprised, Elizabeth agreed, wondering why Lord Sinclair, who rarely showed himself, suddenly wanted her company. As she left to prepare, she cast a final look at the gardener, who watched her with an enigmatic expression. Minutes later, Elizabeth was in the riding area, waiting for Lord Sinclair. To her surprise, the gardener appeared, mounted on one of the sturdiest horses. "The Lord decided not to go and asked me to be your guide instead," he explained, offering his hand to help her mount. The ride began smoothly, with the gardener showing the surroundings of the vast Sinclair estate. The gentle rhythm of the horses and the sound of leaves under their hooves created a serene atmosphere. However, the proximity between Elizabeth and the gardener made her heart beat faster. As they rode along a narrow path between ancient trees, Elizabeth's horse stumbled over an exposed root, causing her to lose balance. In an instant, the gardener was by her side, holding her firmly. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice low and filled with concern. "Yes, I'm fine," Elizabeth replied, her breath catching. "Thank you." She felt the pressure of his hands on her waist, a firm touch that made her realize how much he affected her. He didn't let go immediately, and the proximity between them heightened the tension. Elizabeth could feel his breath near her face, and their gazes met in a moment of pure electricity. "We should continue," he finally said, helping her adjust in the saddle. His touch lingered even after she was secure. The path led them to an open field where they could see the sea in the distance. The wind carried the salty smell of the waves, and the scenery was breathtaking. They decided to stop and let the horses rest, enjoying the view. As they dismounted, Elizabeth tripped over a rock and fell into the gardener's arms. They stayed like that for a moment, too close to be appropriate, but unable to pull away. The sensation of his arms around her, the warmth of their bodies so close, made Elizabeth's heart race. I think I'm okay now," she said, trying to maintain her composure, though her voice trembled slightly. "Sorry," he replied, his voice also a bit hoarse. "I didn't mean to embarrass you." "No, you didn't embarrass me," she whispered, looking at him intently. "You just surprised me." The gardener smiled, a smile that didn't fully reach his eyes, but revealed a mixture of emotions. "Perhaps we need to be more careful." "Yes, perhaps," Elizabeth agreed, though she knew part of her didn't want to be careful. She wanted to explore what was between them, to discover the secrets he kept and understand why he attracted her so much. The tension between them didn't dissipate as they mounted again and continued the ride. Every movement seemed laden with meaning, every word spoken or unspoken built a bridge of feelings that Elizabeth knew she couldn't ignore for much longer. Back at the mansion, as they dismounted, the gardener held her hand for a second longer, their fingers briefly intertwined before letting go. "Thank you for the ride, Elizabeth." "Thank you," she replied, trying to hide the turmoil inside. "It was pleasant." A few days after the horseback ride, the tranquil routine of the mansion was abruptly interrupted by an unexpected announcement. Elizabeth was called by the housekeeper, who handed her a formal invitation. "Lord Sinclair is hosting a charity ball at the mansion," the housekeeper said with a formal smile. "It's to raise funds for a local orphanage. He would like you to attend and prepare accordingly." The news left Elizabeth surprised and intrigued. Until then, she had only heard about Lord Sinclair and his rare appearances. Now, knowing she would have the chance to meet him personally filled her with curiosity and a silent anxiety. As the house bustled with preparations for the grand event, Elizabeth couldn't push away thoughts about Lord Sinclair. The grandeur of the mansion and the complexity of the mysterious gardener who captivated her were intrinsically linked to him. On the night of the ball, watching the guests arrive in elegant attire, Elizabeth felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. Finally, the moment she had been waiting for with such interest had arrived. Continued in the next episode.